that might be a little prickly for some people because there are a lot of people out there who really do love MCT oil and have sort of adopted it wholeheartedly into a paleo model of nutrition. I'm going to talk a little bit about what actually MCTs are, what MCT oil is, and why for me personally, I don't necessarily think that it belongs in a diet that is based on an evolutionary nutrition model. So first off, MCT stands for medium chain triglyceride. So we're going to back it up a step though. We're not going to talk about triglyceride. We're just going to talk about medium chain. So when we talk about fats, they're usually referred to by their chain length. So you can see up here, I have, this is a short chain fatty acid. It has 4 carbons. That's what determines the length of that fatty acid. So this is a C4 because it has 4 carbons. Then this is actually a medium chain fatty acid and it has 10 carbons. Then this would be a long chain fatty acid with 16 carbons. So they're all chained together and you can see that the way they're oriented with the hydrogen on either side. That means that these are also saturated. So these are just the different types of fatty acids. So again, short, medium, and long. Now what makes up a triglyceride? I'm going to erase these. Triglyceride, as you might imagine the word tri, so there's 3 of them. Move this board towards me. So you have this glycerol backbone and then 3 fatty acids. So this is my glycerol. This is some kind of fatty acid, another fatty acid, and a third fatty acid. So this would be called a triglyceride, this whole thing together. Ooh. Triglyceride. Now what makes it a medium chain triglyceride is that at least 2 of these need to be in that medium chain length range. Does that make sense? I hope so. So you could have a long chain on one of them or a short chain, but the other 2 need to be medium. You could in fact have it where all 3 are medium. It's sort of random how that happens. But again, the triglyceride refers to the fact that you have this glycerol backbone plus 3 of these fatty acids, these medium chain fatty acids. The actual medium chain fatty acids are going to be C8, C10, and C12. Now I've written them like that, this 0, it has to do with the saturation factor. Ignore that, you can just know C8, C10, and C12. These are our medium chain triglycerides. They have common names. So this is spelling, caprylic, capric, and lauric. So caprylic, capric, and lauric. And these are all acids. Okay, so these are our 3 medium chain fatty acids. What makes these fatty acids special is that the body absorbs them in a different way. So our long chain fatty acids, I showed you that C16, those longer chain fatty acids, they actually get taken up into the lymphatic system from your small intestine. Then they go into the lymphatic system, they have to make their way before they eventually reach the blood, and then they can finally be processed. Medium chain fatty acids can actually go straight from inside the gut, then they're ferreted through the cell into the blood though. They don't actually have to go through this process of the lymphatic system. So they get into the blood, then they can go to the liver and immediately start being processed for energy, which is why people really like them. And it's become this this thing that people want to use because, hey, it's quick energy and your body can process it really fast. And so that's part of the idea of the benefit of these medium chain fatty acids. The thing is though, the reason why MCT oil was ever made in the first place is in fact because of this process, because it was designed as a product for people who had absorption issues and they just needed to get more calories and they were having a hard time absorbing the longer chain fatty acids because again, they have to go through a slightly different process for the body to use them. So these MCTs were a godsend because it was like, hey, we can now get someone more nutrition, we can get them more calories and not have to worry about this malabsorption issue that they have. Now, why they actually made it into an oil, that's a little bit of another thing because a lot of times with nutrition in the hospital, they might not just be getting it through their gut. They might actually have to have what's called TPN or total parenteral nutrition. What that means is that they're getting all of their nutritional needs met through IV. Well, if you think about it, you can't put something solid through an IV. It has to be liquid at room temperature. So you need, again, those long chain fatty acids, those end up being more solid at room temperature. The shorter the chain of the fatty acid, the more liquid they are. So actually what ends up happening with MCT oil is, I told you that lauric acid was considered a medium chain fatty acid. However, it's kind of this switch. It switches back and forth. It can be either medium or long. And this one, this lauric acid, can actually be more solid at room temperature. So it doesn't make sense, and it didn't work as part of the MCT oil in the hospital, because again, if you're trying to put this fat into an IV, you can't have anything that's going to be solid, right? That just, I mean, I think we can understand logically that that would be dangerous for the patient. So instead, they stripped the lauric acid out, and they made an oil that just had C8 and C10 in it, because these stay liquid at room temperature. So that's actually where MCT oil was derived, was in the hospital setting, and creating a product that A, could be absorbed readily if needed to be through the gut, but that also would be liquid when put through an IV. So that's the basic of this. As I said, though, we've now stripped out this lauric acid. Well, this is a large component of the natural sources of MCT oil. So a lot of people think of MCT oil and coconut oil as being sort of interchangeable, that they go back and forth. And you might see oftentimes that MCT oil was derived from coconut. But the thing is coconut oil is actually 50% lauric acid, and only 15 to 20% between caprylic and capric acids. So it is predominantly lauric acid, which is actually why, if you've ever had coconut oil in a jar, it can oftentimes be somewhat solid at room temperature. This lauric acid contributes to that solid state. The thing about lauric acid as well is we don't know a whole lot. We're still just starting to study it, but there are some researchers, or there have been some researchers out there, particularly Dr. Mary Ng, who died not too long ago, who used to say that lauric acid was conditionally essential. What that means is that under certain disease states, this is something you would absolutely have to get from your diet to survive. What's actually interesting as well is, I told you coconut oil is 50% lauric acid. That's the highest percentage of lauric acid you're going to find in any food source out in the world, at least as far as we know thus far. The second highest source of lauric acid is human breast milk. It's not nearly as high. It's not in the 50s. I believe it's closer to about 10 to 12%. But that is still a pretty high percentage of lauric acid. Now, it's not to say that because it's in breast milk, that suddenly means we should all be consuming it all the time. It's just to say that there is something about lauric acid that, at least as babies, is pretty beneficial to us, because it is part of the fatty acid composition of human breast milk. But the other issue that I have, or the biggest issue I have with these MCT oils, is that there is nothing that exists in nature that is going to be pure C8 and C10. It just doesn't. The MCT oil is highly fractionated, it's highly processed. We have taken coconut oil or palm oil or whatever the thing was that they derived it from, and you have to heat it up, you have to use fractionation, you have to do all of these things to strip out the lauric acid to then get an oil, a liquid oil that is now just C8 and C10. And then it becomes 100% C8 and C10. And I told you coconut oil was only 10 to 20% C8 and C10. The other places you can find C8 and C10 are actually goat's milk. And again, it's in roughly that 10 to 20% category. And actually, that's why they're called capric and caprylic acid. Caper, C-A-P-E-R, is the Latin word for goat. So that was originally where these acids were identified, was in goat's milk. So my biggest concern, my biggest issue is that MCT oil is just not anywhere, it doesn't look like any kind of natural occurring food. You would just never find in nature any kind of natural source that would have that much C8 or C10 in the human diet. Now, again, I don't necessarily know that I think we should be slathering everything in coconut oil either, though, because for most of us, unless we were growing up in a tropical climate, we wouldn't have had access to that much coconut oil. So it's about the balance. It's about finding and using different sources and not always relying on one. But I just think that the heavy-duty reliance on MCT oil is maybe because we don't understand that it is also heavily processed and highly refined. And if the idea of evolutionary nutrition is to get back to things that are closer to what our ancestors would have been eating, then MCT oil, to my mind, just can't fall in that category. Absolutely useful and essential in the hospital setting for certain patients, but should we be dosing ourselves with it every single day? I don't think so. If you have other questions, please send them to me. Hopefully I didn't upset too many of you too much.